Like to collect rupees? Or are you the hero of time who saves the princess? And even better yet, do you like to play musical instruments, particularly to cool songs like the Song of Storms? Well, if these terms are unfamiliar, you're in luck, because today we are talking about The Legend of Zelda, a video game series that spans decades and has millions of followers. But is it good for children's mental health? Well, we're going to talk about the pros and cons from a child psychiatrist's perspective on this episode of Psych Child.
Who has actually played it?
I have, but not like competitively or like.
I played the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES one, for maybe a total of an hour in the late 80s or early 90s.
Zelda is like a generational, intergenerational series, right? We're talking Super Mario Brothers level of popularity. It started in 1986. Right, it spanned over 19 different iterations. It sold a ridiculous amount of 10 million copies in 3 days with its latest installation of Tears of the Kingdom, which is one of the most rapid paced video games of selling history. And that is of 2023, right? Tears of the Kingdom came out in 2023 and 2024. So this has staying power for multiple reasons. And you guys can jump in. My reasons for it is the prototypical stories, the hero story, right? You have Link, a character who doesn't actually communicate with text when you play the game. He just listens, but he is the quintessential zero to hero that over the course of the game becomes stronger and has to fight the bad guy, Ganondorf, and save the princess, which is the equivalent of maybe Princess Peach in Super Mario, but it's Zelda, right? And that it's that titular story that is recapitulated over and over again. And it's one of the first iterations of that Nintendo created. So I think for me, that is the kind of big reason why this game has kind of transcended every age group. Ocarina, Majora's Mask, those games before the Switch kind of ports were open world, so was Skyward Sword, but the openness of the Switch in terms of how and we're talking maps that would take your character maybe several hours to cross in the game if you had no agenda. So, I mean, we're talking massive amounts of area you have to cover to complete.
I have just enough knowledge. All I know is that there's a character named Link with a little sword and a shield. But that is enough for me to hang my hat on to ask questions about it. It's something for me to relate to what they're doing now. That's all it needs to be. I don't need to know all of the plot lines. I don't need to know all the characters in order to have express interest in the thing. And so, and my knowledge of it is 30 years old. But I say that because now let's say there's a new game like Roblox you mentioned, Ash, if you invest 5 to 10 minutes in just learning some of the basic vocabulary, now Roblox is an exception because there's so many different games in it, but Zelda, Casey, or Fortnite, you can have something to connect with your child with and have a basic conversation. And that is the basis for the whole connection. And that's what Psych Child videos are intended to do, is to give a grown-up just enough knowledge to connect with and show some interest in their child's game.
And for clinicians too.
Clinicians and parents. Yep. Yeah. That's what all we want to do. If you can leave the video you're watching right now with 2 or 3 bits of knowledge about the Zelda series, that will go a long way for you in connecting with a kid who plays that.
Yeah, I will say for the longest time too, and obviously I know that Link is the main character, but I totally thought Zelda was. I thought Link was Zelda just because of the name. Yep. Right? And it's
great opening to show the character and be can you name this character? And then multiple choice, Zelda,
That's
Link,
right.
Samus, Mario, whatever. And then a lot of people will get that wrong. They'll think the character is Zelda. Great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it has such a strong structure in that story. But then what makes Legend of Zelda, and a lot of video games do this, Super Mario Brothers did this with, like, for example, Super Mario Sunshine. They took the thought of pollution and made it a theme, right? Or Super Mario Galaxy, exploring space. What Legend of Zelda did for me was the appreciation for music. Both Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker, which were separated by about more than a decade on different systems. Ocarina of Time had you play an ocarina, which would then change the weather, change the time of day, call your horse to you if you needed to get to someplace quickly, and you had to play notes on the Nintendo 64 controller, which was so wild and cool. And, like, your first might be exposition to reading music, right? Because it was like showing what like a time scale was. And then Wind Waker was similar idea, but you acted as a composer, composing the wind, which then attuned to notes, which then led to changes in which your boat would travel if you told the wind to go one way or the other. So I think it was such a cool design because it added extra layers to each iteration that made you feel like, oh man, this is creative. This is really creative and not so challenging that you were like,
I think, one of the winning formulas for this is they keep the basic layer of, progression. Every game has, that zero to hero. You kind of have to rebuild Link back up. Sometimes there's not always an explanation for why you have to do that, but you do. There's always like certain different classes of weapons that you have to go, and there are certain challenges and puzzles that entice you to use the new abilities and the new weapons that you use. So there's that build up. But also every game, they try to infuse a new element somehow. So it may be a music element, it may be a building element, it may be a time travel or time freeze element. It's like add a little bit of something new, but keeping the very core structure of the game.
And when we talk about escapism, like, you could escape with anything, chess, Fortnite, or whatever. But, like, is there an element to, for instance, the Zelda games where you're actually outside, free, wandering around nature? I'm thinking of someone during COVID who was stuck in their house and might have been craving that sense of, wandering around outside and being around trees and grass and stuff, or someone who lives in an apartment building in a concrete jungle somewhere and doesn't have that type of stuff. So do you think that is a factor in people's escapism into a game where it's actually outside?
I think there's multiple elements that would speak to people. There's the element of exploration and being outside in the world. There's a lot of NPCs in the Zelda games, and so there's that aspect
Non-player
of
characters.
There's interactions with all sorts of different types of NPCs there, and there's that. So there's a little bit of that social aspect. There's the whole side quests, and that aspect of I feel like I'm actually being productive and I'm completing something when I'm having trouble getting stuff done in my real life or something like that. So I think there's multiple different elements in that game that appeals to people.
Is it something that you play with other people as part of our game profile of it? No, you're always on your own.
Yeah, it's a primarily single player game.
My other question I always want to know about games is when you talk about behavioral management and family rapport and practicality in the house, is this a game that someone could put down at pretty much any moment? Or is it something that parents have to be mindful of rounds or units of time? I don't think it is, or certain missions.
It depends. It depends on what you're doing at the time in the game. The mass majority of the game, you can pick it up, put it down. That's fine. But if you are in the middle of a battle, like a boss fight, you can't walk away from it.
Okay.
How long does this usually last?
Depends on the boss and depends on how good you are.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's some of those boss fights are so difficult. If you manage to get to a certain, and the thing is that, like, some of the big bosses, there's like 3 phases. So you get past the first phase, the boss changes, and you have to try a different tactic to beat the second phase, and then you have to do, beat the third phase, and that's like the final phase. If you manage to survive and hold on to a certain amount of hit points or something, getting through the first two, stages of the boss, you can't just walk away.
You
Just
can't
may
save
not be able to do it
progress.
again.
You can't save your progress. No.
Not
Well,
mid battle.
well, this is interesting, right? Because as technology gets more advanced, for example, on the PS5s, it has like SSD like fast like saving and loading times that are almost zero to like a few like seconds. Many of the games, if you're just stop, will actually just kind of stop itself. You don't have to shut the system off. You can almost put it into sleep mode, and that
Autosaves.
will then cause, and then you can kind of pick it right back up. So, for example, when I play on my PlayStation 5 and I have to stop my game, unless I'm in an online game where I'll be kicked and I have to finish the round, if it's typically a single player, not online version, it'll actually pick up right where I left off. So this is going to be a kind of a different thing of like testing with the new consoles, especially with the Nintendo Switch 2 that's about to come out. That it does it have that type of saving storage where you can just like sit and put it to sleep.
I mean, you with the Switch, which is the main platform that the two newest Zelda games are out on, there is like if you hit the power button, it would just go into instant sleep. And theoretically, you can just pick up and walk away. But the thing is, in sleep, it's still draining the battery.
Yeah.
And so if you're not careful, if you don't keep it plugged in, it could run out of battery before the next time you come out, and then your game will die.
But are you
Yeah.
saying if you're in the middle of a boss fight and it's time to go to bed, you can press that one button, plug it in?
Can, and it theoretically just freezes where you are. However, the games also have something called cutscenes, where it's basically a movie that's playing and you have no control. The game is it's playing a movie essentially. You can't pause in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Okay, you said it varies. Could it be more than a half hour?
Usually not a cutscene, but sometimes it can be like 5.
Do you know when they're coming, or is it like you're wandering?
Not
and
always.
Right.
Not always.
Right. So it's hard for parents then to kind of come and say like, you have 15 more minutes of this, and then we're going to have to turn it off.
Yeah, with my kid, because she played both Breath of the Wild and is playing Tears of the Kingdom. She loves that game. We have very strict bedtimes. That's one of the criteria about her being able to access video games. She has to honor bedtime. But because I know how the game's set up is like, if I give her like, hey, you have 10 minutes before bedtime, start, don't get into a dungeon, don't walk into a temple right now, don't start any side quests or anything. You need to just, finish up what you're doing, save and quit. But when I give her like the 5-minute warning, she's like, I just walked into a cutscene, I can't shut this down. I'll be like, okay, as soon as finish the cutscene. Because like I understand that's not something that you can cut off, but I do warn her, like, if you're about close to bedtime, don't start something.
I think that's awesome. I would add a bullet point there. Hey, you have 10 minutes before we have to stop playing. Explore the map. And don't continue the main story. If you continue the main story, it will drive you to want to complete quests. Any game, right? But side quests, right, and exploring the map, you don't have such a significant commitment to it, meaning you can come back to it. If you start exploring the story, it's going to make you want to progress it even more.
What else can people ask about or connect with their kids?
There's upgrades that you can get for your weapons. There's different costumes that you can get in Zelda. Also in Zelda, most of the time, the different costumes actually have a function. So there's like certain side quests where you have to put on like particular costumes to be able to accomplish the side quest. So you have to make sure you get that costume, or like different environments require different types of costumes. Like if you're in a really cold environment, you really need like a warm costume, versus if you're in a really hot desert environment, you need like a more protective from heat type of costume. So costumes actually do have function.
Costumes? Is that the right word for parents to use? Are they called skins? Are they called gear? Just so parents can.
Yeah, I mean, tunics are typically what Link wears. If you want to be even more particular about it, but I mean, just wearing like, why are you wearing a red shirt versus a blue shirt, right? Well, you
Okay.
know, and Breath of the Wild, from I remember, the blue shirt is like Arctic gear, so you can tolerate the temperature better when you go into the mountains. But if you don't wear that, then your character will die. So you have to find that gear first, right?
And then when it's time to go to school and they don't want to put their winter coat on, you
Yeah,
have something to go off of.
just like Link.
Yep. And yeah, I mean that's just a great piece of connection.
Yeah, the different added to portion of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is not just the open worldness, but durability of equipment, which was used to be a little bit here and there with some of the other Legend of Zeldas. But what it forces you to do is basically kind of be conservative in your attacking and to really think about how you're going to approach fighting enemies because your favorite weapon might break and you might not be able to get it back. So it actually forces players to be a little bit less impulsive and
That is
more.
such a useful skill.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it
That
reminds
is
me of-
such a useful skill. That's right.
Well, there you have it. The pros of Legend of Zelda seem to outweigh the cons. These include exploration and finding everything on a map, to creative expression with musical instruments. At times, people can get addicted to this game because it is a pretty enthralling story, but there are ways and tips and tricks to stop that type of addiction to that gameplay. If you'd like to learn more about any of the video games or social media topics we talk about here at PsychChild, visit our website at psychchild.com. Y'all have a wonderful day.